martes de los tacos.
That's
Taco
right.
Bout-It Tuesday.
Taco Bout-It Tuesday. We've got Brian Manning with us today.
Yay.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo
Díganle
están
hola
todos?
al amigo Brian.
Hola, buenos, lo que sea.
Hola a todos. Y estamos hoy en Tacos
Del
Julio en Pasadena on Spencer Highway.
The people have been so nice here. I've really enjoyed talking with them.
Yes, and they actually have 2 locations. The other one is on Airline. And we saw a lot of good reviews, and this was actually a place that somebody said that we should come and try. So here we are. So
And look
we'll
at
let
that,
you know.
guys. So
Yes.
I've got dos trompo,
Dos tacos de trompo,
and I've got dos bistec,
dos tacos de bistec.
and then so the quesadilla, I like cheese only, but it does come with the meat usually.
Yes, and it has grilled onions and un
Which
chilito toreado.
Which I need to
quesadilla.
add all of these little things.
Yes, so it has 4 tacos, una quesadilla, chilito toreado, cebollitas.
Some good salsas.
Yes, and this is their Wednesday special. So they have specials, okay? They have specials, so this is their Wednesday special. So este es el especial del miércoles para que vengan a probarlos. Súper económico y vamos a ver qué deliciosos están. Porque bien recomendados.
The bonus is these napkins. We've been forgetting to get napkins every time.
Yes,
Not a good
actually gave us
idea.
Napkins, yes.
Yeah, so great idea.
Yes. What did you get, Brian?
I don't remember the word. ¿Tlacotepeque? ¿Algo así?
Del
Tacos.
peque. Wait.
¿Tlacotepeque? O no conozco la palabra. Exactamente.
No, baby, espérame.
Barbacoa. Something.
Barbacoa.
Algún tipo de taco de barbacoa.
Tlaquepaque tacos.
Tlaquepaque.
Yes.
Así es.
Tlaquepaque.
Okay, tlaquepaque.
Tacos. Oh, you're supposed to get the special sauce.
I think that's it.
You did. Ooh.
Ahí está.
You have to show us on the video how you're gonna just pour that over the tacos.
And there's some grilled onions in here. I had to use my hands, guys.
It's supposed to be like this.
Okay, here
Brian, look this way, right here.
Okay, that looks nice. I'll do a little bit of that action.
So
Nice.
we're gonna see how that's gonna be with tacos de barbacoa.
And they actually did
new
give us a
recipe.
spoon, so
Oh yeah, no, they're
They-
amazing, and
they set us up.
it is actually a sit-down restaurant, so you can come in with your family and sit down and eat and enjoy, your meal. So it's very, very convenient.
yeah, it looked nice inside, and that we were immediately greeted by people, and everybody was really nice.
They're like, come and sit down everywhere, anywhere you want to sit down. They have actually natural, water, flavored water. Aguas frescas, that's what we call them. And so I got the one mango. This is mango flavored, and it's really, really tasty. Now, Brian,
Tell us
I'm not picking on anybody, but he got a regular water. Come on, Brian. Nobody comes
Slightly
to Pasadena
lame.
and gets regular water.
Slightly lame, sorry. I'll do better next time. Next Taco Tuesday.
I was thinking how healthy he was. That's great.
Yeah, he's really sticking to his diet. Not me.
No way.
Forget about
I can't
that.
do that here.
Okay, I cannot wait.
All right, so
I'm digging right in.
So while they
my
do
God.
that, I'll tell you, Brian is an immigration attorney, and he's handling a lot of immigration issues, and especially asylum.
So I know that you're passionate about helping people, especially immigrants, about people who have who are coming from a different country. You've been in different countries, so you've seen it firsthand.
Yep.
And now you're basically on the other side, trying to help them to just kind of maneuver their way through the immigration system, because as it seems, at least to me, it's changing every day, or just very, very frequently. So it's kind of hard to keep up. So tell us more about your practice, Brian.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for the chance to be here. Glad to be with you guys. A lot of fun.
I'm so glad you're here.
Very kind of you to invite me.
I'm glad.
We're so excited about you opening your office.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Very excited.
We're very glad about that. We're also very glad about tacos.
Yes.
Yeah, the tacos are excellent. They're so good.
Very good, very good. Yeah, so I'm Brian, and I'm originally from Oklahoma. I've been here in Houston for 2.5 years. Moved here from Bulgaria, which is in South Central Europe, and I was a diplomat for about 8.5 years with the Department of State. And in that time, I did some of the visa work. So they call it the consular work. When people from other countries want to come to the United States, you know, they usually need to get a visa. So I've done some of that work. So I've seen that side of our immigration system. But then more recently, I was over at USCIS, or U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Se refiere usualmente como UCES, que yo sepa en español. I was at the Asylum office, and I, for a couple of years, was an asylum officer. So the person who's actually interviewing people who are from other countries and are here and are afraid to go back to their country, so they want to seek like protection here. And they do that by applying for asylum. So I was interviewing them and deciding whether they got asylum. The great thing about asylum is that it allows you to stay here permanently. And in fact, after 1 year after getting asylum, you can apply for your green card, as they call it, or your permanent residency, which lets you stay indefinitely and gives you a lot of rights. And then a little bit after that, you can change that into citizenship, or you can apply for citizenship. You're eligible to get your citizenship. So that's what I was up to the last 2.5 years. But you know, I'd always kind of thought that I might want to do private immigration law, be an immigration lawyer, and it became increasingly clear to me over the last couple of years that was something I needed to do, especially because of the way that the policies were changing and the rules were changing with immigration, which is to say, you know, the administration that's in office now wants to basically end immigration. I mean, they're doing everything they can to make it as hard as possible for people to come here and for people to stay here. I think that's bad for our country in very many ways. And I wanted to finally change sides and advocate for people, to proactively support people in achieving their immigration goals. And so that's what I'm trying to do now. And I started my law firm to do that. My firm is called Manning.We, and my office is close to downtown, right outside downtown on Washington Avenue, and the address is 1923 Washington Avenue in Houston. Here's my card, and the phone number is 713-909-0401. And yeah, so people can come in there to my office, you know, by appointment and talk things over. But I'm also happy. I know Houston's a big city. It takes a while to get around. So I'm also happy to talk by phone, to talk by Skype or WhatsApp, you know, whatever.
That is awesome, because you're right. And a lot of people, you know, a lot of people might be just afraid hearing the word downtown, but let me tell you, it's not that bad, okay? And you can always call, like you said. And, you know, being able to talk to you, especially on their language, you know, especially for Spanish speaking, you know, at least for my community, I think that's a big plus. You're good too. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. You got me, and I got you.
All right, okay.
But we're so happy that you have your office now, and that you're actually gonna be helping people in the community. So I'm very, very happy.
It's exciting. It's fun.
So I'm excited for you. I think you're gonna do great.
What I would like to know is, you know, what does asylum mean? I mean, what is it when we hear the term asylum, then we talk about refugees, and can you kind of give a definition of what asylum means? Sure.
So asylum is basically our government saying, hey, we recognize that you have been or may be persecuted, is the word that they use, but that basically just means harmed really bad, like harm bad, okay? That you could be harmed really bad in your country. In your country, it's either the government that's doing this to you, or that you're afraid of, or it's someone that your government is like unable or unwilling to control. In other words, they're not able or willing to protect you, okay? So when someone's in a circumstance like that, we say, okay, well, you can stay then. We're, you know, as a policy decision, we've decided that we want to protect people like that. We want to let them stay here. And so that's basically what it is the government, U.S. government saying, hey, because you're afraid of being persecuted, you can stay. And as I explained earlier, that leads to some really good benefits. You can end up staying permanently and even possibly becoming a citizen. Now, it's more complicated than that. Obviously, it's not. You can't just say, I'm afraid to go to my country. You know, stamp my passport and let me stay. It's to get asylum, a person has to prove or demonstrate that the people that they fear will hurt them would be motivated by first like certain reasons, that there's something about the person that would make, you know, either the government or someone else in their country want to hurt them. And so there's these what they call 5 protected characteristics.
Okay.
That as an asylum seeker you have to say, hey, it's not just that the government or someone there wants to hurt me, it's they want to hurt me because one of these 5 things applies in my situation. So it has to do with someone's race,
Okay.
their religion, their nationality, their political opinion, or something that's called membership in a particular social group. And that one's complicated, and there's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a lot of court cases and litigation surrounding kind of what that means and who's included in that.
Now, on the asylum cases, can anyone from any country apply to that for that, or is there like certain countries that it's just like, no, we know that you're good, you know, your country is good, we're not automatically.
Yeah.
Does that even?
Yeah, technically anyone from any country can apply.
Okay.
You're unlikely probably to get asylum if you're coming from some highly developed country that has, you know, strong systems for protecting people, like civil rights and, you know, security, a strong security apparatus that actually, you know, respects people's rights and to which you can turn if you're afraid of being harmed. But even in countries that some of us would at first blush think, oh, you know, they're from, you know, say Vietnam, like that doesn't seem like that bad of a place. There's no war going on there. They're not like, you know, it's not like they're the Nazis going after people or whatever. There are countries like that that it would probably surprise you to learn that, yeah, people from there can and do get asylum.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. So it's very interesting that you bring that up, though. The nationality being one of the criteria, or one of the 5
grounds, we'll call them, for getting asylum. Yeah,
Grounds.
5 grounds.
Does that mean that, you know, I'm thinking about a lot of the Central American countries. I was thinking about El Salvador in particular, or Honduras, that, you know, a lot of people are trying to flee there due to the violence in the country. Maybe this is a situation you were talking about where the government's not able to or not willing to control what was going on there. So would that mean that everybody from, like, say, El Salvador would fall into one of those categories or rounds?
So that's tricky. So there are a bunch of asylum seekers, as you can imagine, from, like, you know, what we call the Northern Triangle: El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, to a lesser extent Mexico, but mainly those 3. And it usually is people that are, you know, fleeing gang or gang-related violence. And there has been a lot of debate over the last few years about whether that kind of persecution or that kind of fear fits within this one of these 5 grounds for asylum, the one that's called membership in a particular social group. So in the past, a couple of years ago, it was often the case that you could make that argument and win, that you could sometimes make that argument and win that based on gang violence, or also domestic violence. Often it was women who were in a very abusive relationship and were virtually unable to, like, leave and get away from that relationship. Those kind of scenarios in the past have at times been kind of like winning arguments for getting asylum. But then the government changed that within the last couple of years. There have been a couple of big decisions that the Attorney General, who's in charge of this immigration system, basically has made it much more difficult. So basically, though, the short answer to your question is, these days it's really tough to get asylum by saying, I'm afraid of the gangs, or I'm afraid, you know, they're trying to make me pay the rent out, they're going to kill me if I don't pay. Or for, like, domestic violence cases, it's hard these days. It's not necessarily impossible, though, because there can often be little, you know, depending on the circumstances of the case, of a very on an individualized basis, there may be other things going on in that case that allow someone to get asylum. And let me add that sometimes it's possible to be able to stay in the United States, even if you don't qualify for asylum, because you don't fit neatly into one of those 5 categories. You might still be able to stay by getting a different form of protection that's not technically called asylum, but we have this. There's this international treaty called the Convention Against Torture, where we're basically saying, okay, if you're going to get tortured in your country, we'll let you stay here. And for that, you don't have to prove that the torture that you fear would be because of or on account of one of those 5 protected grounds. It's just, are you going to get tortured? And is it, if the torture is either by the government or the government is basically turning a blind eye to that torture, then you can stay in the United States. You don't get as many benefits as you do if you get asylum, but it's still, it's maybe saving your life. Yeah, maybe saving your life.
Wow. Well, as you can hear, he knows what he's talking about.
Thanks.
For sure.
I mean, and he's passionate, which is even more important, because one thing is to learn, and get the experience about it, but actually be passionate about it and actually care. That's hard to find, and I think that's gonna be so important to anyone who's seeking either asylum or just protection from their country, to have somebody like you on their side who really cares, and who's really gonna be there to help them and to listen to them, because you've been on both sides now, and so you understand where they're coming from. You've been in different countries, you've been there to serve, and so it's like it's first-hand knowledge, which I think in this situation it will come so handy.
Thank you.
I know that one of the changes that's happened with asylum is, I might be getting the terminology wrong, but, and especially the southern border we're talking about, crossing over not at a port of entry before, as long as they were basically on U.S. soil, right, they would be entitled to request asylum, but now they're being forced to they tried to at least make them where they had to go to an entry. Is it called a port of entry?
Yep.
Am I getting something wrong on that? There's some changes that are going on there, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes, including with how things are handled, like at the border.
Okay.
So you can apply for asylum when you are, if you come to a port of entry. So like at one of the official border crossing stations, like San Ysidro or whatever, over by Brownsville, whatever. You can walk up to the board to the crossing checkpoint, and say, hey, I want to apply for asylum, right? You can also, though, do it even if you cross the border illegally without authorization and you get caught or you come in contact with officials. You can say, hey, I want asylum. So both ways you can apply for it. However, the issue is that the government usually then puts a person that does either of those things into what they call expedited removal proceedings, where they're basically like, sorry, you don't have permission to be here. Well, they put anyone who comes across, even if they don't ask for asylum, they put them in these proceedings where it's like you're going to get deported very, very soon, unless you say, hey, I want asylum. So when someone does that, they then go on to have a very brief interview, a telephone interview with an asylum officer, which is what it used to be. It's kind of like a pseudo asylum interview. It's like a pre-screening interview, and sometimes that turns into them then getting a chance to have a full case before an immigration judge. But some of the changes, probably to what you're talking about, there've been a bunch of them recently, to make this process sort of harder and to get people out faster. There've been recent changes, and a lot of it is kind of day to day in terms of a court somewhere may say, oh, sorry, government, you can't do this thing today, but then the next day another higher up court says yes, you can. So it's always in flux. But there have been changes to include not allowing or making people who are from Central America and who come up to the border saying you cannot get asylum unless you first applied for it in another country that you passed through along the way and got refused.
Oh, wow.
So like basically, if you didn't apply for asylum in Mexico and get refused, we're not even going to let you apply for it here. So that's one thing that the government has done recently.
So that wouldn't apply to people from Mexico because they're directly next to us, but
Right.
it would apply for if they pass through one or two countries on the way
Right.
here.
Exactly. And then another really controversial policy that's been in place for about a year now is what is referred to as Remain in Mexico, or technically the Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, that is basically sending people to Mexico to wait while their asylum process in the U.S. kind of unfolds, because it takes time, right, to go through the immigration court system. In the past, people would come to the United States, say, hey, I want asylum, And after they had this credible fear interview that I mentioned earlier, if their case was going to be sent to an immigration judge for a hearing that might be months or even years later, usually if the person wasn't perceived as like some kind of security risk, the authorities would let them go. They would let them free into the United States, and they just had to show back up for their court appearance. But that's changed in the sense that the government, for a lot of people now, is sending them to Mexico and saying, you got to go to Mexico and wait. We'll let you know when your court hearing is, and we'll give you a permission to cross back in to go to this basically tent camp right across the border in like Texas and have your hearing. So that's been really, really hard on people who, you know, a lot of these Central Americans don't have any ties to Mexico. They don't know it. Some of the border towns are very dangerous. So yeah, there's been several things like that, Dawn, in the last couple of years that have just made it hard for people to get asylum.
I've heard a couple of things that's made it more difficult, and you know, is that on these the credible fear the interview, is that what it's called?
Yep.
That they're trying to allow some of the border patrol agents actually to do some of that questioning.
Yep.
Also, I heard that in the past, once you were granted entry into the United States, I think it was like, you can tell me, but it's like a half a year or something, then they can start working. Now they've made it where if you do get in, you have to wait at least a year. So they're making it very difficult. You're not entitled to any benefits, of course, during that period. It's really hard to you can't work, and you have to hire your own attorney. So you have to have some money to do that. So in a lot of ways, and if I'm wrong about anything, correct me, but you know, it sounds like they've made it very difficult to be able to even sustain asking for asylum.
Yeah, they have. They definitely have. There have been changes, not just in asylum, or not just in this context of when someone crosses the border, but also when they're like here on, say, a tourist visa and they apply for asylum. The government has tried to change the rules about when you're eligible for this work permit to try to discourage people basically from applying for asylum.
Yeah.
So that's been tough for a lot of people. And yeah, there's been no shortage of things like that, not just in asylum, but also, you know, across the board for all kinds of immigration matters, like raising the filing fees. There's been this, the government's trying to enact this change that would called the public charge inadmissibility, where basically they're saying, hey, if we are convinced that like you don't have enough money to sustain yourself, you're not going to be able to get like a green card or to get certain immigration benefits. And that's kind of always been in place, but this interpretation of how the government has said, hey, this is how we're going to do this now, like super strict and super hard, that's changed, and that's recent. It's just another example of something that the government's trying to do to just discourage people from trying to come.